Okay. Yeah, I didn't give you the proper cue. Anybody else? Yeah.
The musical overhang.
Yeah.
Things.
Yeah. Musical harp, a piece of art.
Yeah.
But did you really know how it was working, and it wasn't just stomping down on the ground?
Yeah, it was like the sensors from above.
Yeah, but not a lot of people realize that. So, yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Have a really good time? Okay. Yeah, Bryce.
It was funny when Eric and I was putting these kids on the tree thing.
Yeah.
And then like somebody's dad came and grabbed them all.
Were you spinning them really fast, or were they spinning you fast? Okay. So, yeah, well, you know, the park's supposed to be inclusive for everybody, even tall people and old people and students and old people like me. I'm telling you, I decided to go down the blue slide, and it was actually pretty terrifying for me because, number one, I haven't done that in a while, and number two, it was even sort of hard to get down to the ground for me, and I'm not as flexible as I used to be. But I think, yeah, so I don't know which was the bigger emotion, fun or terror, but I just hadn't experienced that in a while. Okay, so we got the standard forms here that you all know about. Everybody should have an evaluation form. Everybody gets to evaluate everybody else, but you don't evaluate yourself. So go to the page where your team has that box for your team and just put an X through the box so that you won't mistakenly mark yourself, okay? Your evaluation is very helpful to the teams because rather than getting just one evaluation from me, you get an evaluation from everybody else. And those perspectives change per person. Okay, so that's the evaluation form. You should use a pen. You need to use a pen. So if you don't have a pen in your hand, I have lots of them. And you have a pen?
I do.
Yeah, well, this one has a really good font. So don't you, what? Sure. And you can keep it. I have so many pens just for this occasion. Don't use a pen that will bleed through to the other side because that messes up the evaluation on the other side. So, so use a proper pen that has a legible font. Okay. So a week from today, we're going on another field trip to the VA Medical Center, which is just down the road. And ought to be interesting. How many people have ever been into a VA hospital before? Okay, not very many. So this will be your first time. So it's going to be a new experience. We're going to, our host is Dr. Graham Creasy, who's a staff physician in the spinal cord injury service. So he'll be talking about the VA in general, the Palo Alto VA, spinal cord injury, and we'll hopefully get to talk to a veteran with a disability and maybe see some assistive technology that they use. So it ought to be a really good time. Not only see it, but get on it. Get on into wheelchairs and hand bikes and other things like that. So hopefully that'll all work out. So in preparation for that, we have another carpool driver sign-up sheet. So please fill this out for people who can carpool other people there. We really need to have a bunch of cars to serve everybody. And then on Tuesday, we'll have the passenger sign-up sheet like we did for the playground. And so, yeah, be sure. So only students and people community members who carpool other students are welcome to attend because it's a pretty small area. So that's the difference there. So next Tuesday, we're going to learn about motion and gait analysis by Professor Jessica Rose. She runs the Motion and Gait Analysis Laboratory at Stanford, and she works with kids with cerebral palsy who have walking impairments. So she'll be talking about gait and motion because in one aspect, the human body is a biomechanical system, and as mechanical engineers or engineers, it's nice to know how the body works and how they can use gait analysis to help these kids with cerebral palsy. Midterm reports are due next Tuesday. I have a whole list of links that I'll send you. And so there's a bunch of tips about putting sketches in your report, adding captions, and stuff like that. So this should be very helpful to you. So these are the team project presentations for today in this order. The teams, I just want to remind everybody about the laser pointer, which everybody is going to use. And this is what I told people to do for the presentations. And looking through the slides, they look really good. So thank you for your effort in that. So, you've selected a problem to work on, and you've been meeting with the user, understanding the problem, and brainstorming and building some prototypes and testing them. And so now's the time to do your first presentation. But because of our limited time, we're not going to have time for questions. So we're not even going to have time for these questions. So I think I'm going to try starting right now rather than taking a break to make sure everybody gets a good chance. And hopefully this will work as... First team is Uno, Dos, Tres. You got this?
Yep.
You know how to do it? Wait, sit down, get my stuff. Go.
Okay, hi guys, we're the Uno Dos Tres. This is two of us. Akash is not with us this week.
Yeah, so we were working with Fernanda on her wheelchair work tray. So essentially the aim was to make a portable work tray that she could use for a variety of reasons in a variety of spaces.
So we're going to start with the problem. So upon talking with Fernanda, she mentioned to us that she's a very active person and wants to be able to work in places other than her office. She consults for various different companies, and so she doesn't go to work every day. She often works at home, and mentioned to us that she likes to get out of the house and work in a more busy environment. A lot of places, especially in Palo Alto, are not very wheelchair friendly, and they're very overcrowded. As you can see, this is Phil's, and this is probably a less busy day at Phil's where the line is not out the door. And oftentimes it's awkward for her to ask someone in a wheelchair accessible spot to get up and move so that she can sit in the table that will accommodate her wheelchair. This is kind of just describing what I just said, just that confrontation is not something she likes to have to go through with people, able-bodied people in a wheelchair accessible spot.
Definitely. So that was the problem. Now we're going to talk about the need. So we met with Fernanda earlier weeks of the quarter. And like Heidi just said, she likes to be mobile and she likes to do work anywhere. And she doesn't want this tray to be specifically made for her. She wants it to be not attached to her wheelchair. She wants it, go to the next slide. She wants it to be able to fold up, fit in her purse. Anyone could also use it, so it doesn't just fit the measurements of exactly what she is, that anyone could use this. So there were a few musts that she really wanted and some extras that we're still working on with that prototypes. She wanted it to be light. Like I said, she wants it to be foldable to fit in her purse. She wants a handle on it so it's easy to pick up. She doesn't have super great grip string. A non-slip surface, so when her laptop or whatever is on top of the desk, it's not sliding off. And potentially posture enhancing. She sits in a chair for most of the day, so anything that can help her posture is important. since Akash couldn't be here, he videoed
He did a
kind of our design
screen share.
ideas.
We went about trying to find a design that would help solve Fernanda's problem while adhering to the requirements she laid out for us. We went through a long brainstorming session and eventually narrowed it down to 3 design choices. The first design is an attempt to accommodate different heights for the tray. Basically, there are 2 side support pieces that are connected in the back that create pseudo shelves for the work tray itself to be slid in and out of at varying heights. Ultimately, this design was scrapped due to it requiring 2 separate pieces and it taking up too much space. The second design is more simplistic. When open, it is essentially a box with no bottom or back. The front of this box has indents made for Fernanda's legs so it supports her legs exactly how she wants. Both sides and the front hinge and fold upwards to the top tray part to make it compact. We also decided against this design for 2 main reasons. The first is that with so many parts hinging, the user's fingers will likely get pinched between 2 pieces folding. The other is that the tray starts to get very heavy with so many panels and it might be difficult to pull out of a bag. Our last and final design is much more ergonomic. Fully open, it's similar to a stool. The work tray itself has arm pads for typing, a slot to one side to act as a handle similar to what you see on a cutting board, and is potentially hinged down the middle so that it folds in half and has a much smaller footprint in a bag. The side panels that the tray stands on are not just one solid slab, but are actually mostly empty to keep it all light. These side panels also play the role of holding Fernanda's legs together during use. As you can see in the SolidWorks model, the side panels fold up into the work tray, and the bottom of the work tray is actually hollowed out so that the side panels fit exactly into the bottom of the tray when closed, leaving a neat rectangular prism.
Thank you, Akash. So some of the things that helped inspire our design ideas, one of them is this foldable stool. It's a child stool for when they're trying to brush their teeth at the sink. 2 things we liked about this design. 1, the integration of the rubber in the plastic, and 2, the fact that it folds up into a flat object. Similarly, we wanted a non-slip surface, and because in the scope of this class, especially after we heard in the Eat Well presentation, that it's very difficult and a long process to get plastic manufactured parts, and that you need to be ordering them in very large quantities for it to be cost effective. So we will not be plastic molding anything. So one solution we came up with for a non-slip surface was taking a silicone baking mat that you would put on a cookie sheet so your cookies don't stick, and covering half of the tray with the non-slip surface so that she can rest her laptop on and it won't slip off, and she'll still have a slick surface for writing.
Yeah, so as you can see, this is our initial prototype. It's all made out of foam core, so it's pretty simple. Legs fold in, this folds together. One of the problems we found out with making this is clearly this is a V, not completely flush, which is a pretty easy design fix. Like Akash said in the CAD model, hollowing out essentially this main piece so that these legs can fit inside of it, and that it'll fold more nicely.
Future ideas with this project would be to make it out of plastic. One of the things we really liked about the EWO project is the integration between the non-slip rubber and the plastic.
Yeah.
Finish up if you have a little bit more.
No, that's it.
That was last time.
Just that molding plastic is expensive because the tools to make them cost upwards of $100,000.
Last thing is to say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have the 3 cookies.
So we are the Three Cookies. We're one of the two groups that are working with the Magical Bridge Playground, which is where we went last Tuesday. And as you were able to see, their main goal is to make a very inclusive and fun and magical playground for kids and adults of all backgrounds, all needs. So this ongoing problem that we have is that there's a need for accessible playground structures. There's been extensive research done that play is important in child development. So considering that importance, we need to allow kids to play, but to do that, we need to make those play structures, playgrounds, accessible and fun, and also active. Here we see some of the current ADA guidelines that are set for playgrounds. There's an extensive list where they give you height restrictions and how wide ramps need to be, but this is how they summarize. There are 3 bullet points of how they try to make playgrounds more compliant for, or ADA compliant. One thing I did want to point out is they mentioned on public playgrounds, at least one of each ground level play component must be accessible. And I think this is something that the Magical Bridge Playground is really trying to fight against, where instead of distinguishing between some playground structure that's accessible and then having non-accessible playground structures, it's about making the entire playground accessible to everyone. So as we were also looking up ADA compliant playgrounds, we found images like these where there's ramps that are wide enough for wheelchairs, but then you get down to the bottom and you see wood chips. So we see that there's a gap between being ADA compliant and the reality of, there's still wood chips on the side. And as we saw in Magical Bridge, and Olenka is really proud of the fact that the playground has no wood chips. So we see this ongoing problem of, yes, there are guidelines to make playgrounds ADA compliant, but there's still a lot more work to be done. A little bit of the magnitude of the problem, emphasizing on this bottom line here, stating that there are a lot of playgrounds that are ADA compliant, but still there are no accessible playgrounds in major cities that have more than 100,000 children under the age of 15. So we decided to, actually this is my cousin that we decided to interview, so he's completely deaf and also over the past years has developed a couple of visual impairments. And I decided to just talk to him a bit about his experiences going to playgrounds. And I think it was really important to hear his side, because he really made us realize that anyone who goes to a playground has an imagination, and a kid can make something fun. And I think we were like overcomplicating the problem and trying to make something super complicated. So it was nice to talk to him. And as we were going into our design, realizing that making something simple and cool, as Dave likes to emphasize, was much more important.
So the next person that we interviewed was Jay at the Magical Bridge Playground. And so things that we came away from this conversation with was that what accessible playgrounds look like, that people who are active in wheelchairs actually live longer than those who aren't, and that's something that we incorporated into our project. And also that the playground structure does not need to be inclusive like on every single level. It's kind of impossible. So it's good to make a variety of structures that are inclusive for a bunch of people. And so, as I said, the statement of our specific need was an active wheelchair accessible equipment that the Magical Bridge Playground already has, and that we wanted to build upon this because it was important to us that we incorporate things that are also active. And so there are existing solutions and their limitations. So as you can see in this sort of structure, there are little merry-go-round structures, but those who are able to propel the motion forward are those who are able-foot. And there's also these hand bicycles where you can use the hand motion in order to propel the motion forward. And the problem is that these are very expensive. A merry-go-round costs $50,000. A hand cycle bike is $1,000 to $4,000. And what's great about playgrounds is that they are for the public, and so because they're for the public, they should be accessible to everybody. And so we kind of combined these two ideas, but it took a while for us to reach there. We ended up starting with like 30 plus designs, and we ended up pitching these all to Jay in like rapid fire motion. And these range from things that were more like VI focused to things such as like a zip line for wheelchairs. After we got feedback from Jay, we ended up talking to Dave and pitching our top 3 designs. One was the interactive kitchen, and for a lot of the things that we evaluated it on, it was great, but we didn't find it super exciting. It was just making the kitchen structure at the playground like a little bit more interactive, adding gears, like things to move. We also had a one-at-a-time slide, but because there's already so many slides at the Magical Bridge Playground, we weren't sure if people were going to want to use it. We were also concerned about the safety. And so we ended up deciding on a hand-powered ride, and things that we were worried about was the technical feasibility and engineering difficulty. And so Rachel will tell you about our process in trying to overcome these issues.
Yeah, sure. So once we kind of found a design that we wanted to pursue, we headed to room 36 to start prototyping. We talked to the room 36 TAs, and they affected our design, what we wanted out of it. And initially, we started going more towards kind of a rotating platform idea. We thought that would be easier mechanically, but as we worked harder, we became really attached to kind of this like single buggy system. And we were using foam core and what's the wood called? Duran wood, and the dowels in order to create a spinning platform, which we would eventually turn into something that looks like this with hand-powered motion. We have a picture of our prototype here, and it's also up front. The idea is that people or children can sit in the chairs, and the top dowel will be turned into the hand-powered crank that Amy showed on the bike. We have a video of how it turned out. We don't need sound. If there is sound, that's fine too. So in this video, me and Alex are only turning the dowels. We're not pushing it in any direction. And as we turn the dowels, we created a belt using a rubber band that turns the bottom wheel. So that's the ideal for, no, that's good. That's the ideal for what we want eventually. I guess we're out of time, but real quick, can I touch on what we want in the future? In the future, we're going to attach the center spinning part at a more hip level. With the chairs, we're going to make a more to-scale model and use higher resolution materials for our final prototype, in addition to creating a transfer platform. You guys probably saw that with Magical Bridge for wheelchair accessibility. These are some of the statistics that came from our prototype, and yeah, that's it. Thank you guys very much.
Next we have team harnessing power.
So we're the hybrid harness team. I'm Eric.
I'm Bryce.
And I'm Kelsey.
Okay. So what are we talking about? We're talking about a harness body powered for a transradial amputee. That's usually from trauma or tumor. Their options are the body powered harness, where the terminal device has a cable, and the cable is connected to a harness, and that is operated by biscapular abduction, like this, or by shoulder extension. And that's not cosmetic, but it's very, very functional. And then the myoelectric prosthesis that we've seen in Dave's talk, you get electrical signals from the muscles that remain in the forearm, and that opens and closes it. Cool, cosmetic, not very functional. So problems with the body-powered harness, that's what we're concentrating on. Primarily, the harness digs into the armpit on the opposite side, and then the force or the excursion that's required to operate the terminal device, in this case it's a hook, can be too much for someone with physical limitations like a bowed back or muscle issues. The magnitude of the problem is that basically everyone who has a body-powered harness has an issue with this. But what the issue is, whether it's force, excursion, discomfort, is going to be different per person.
So before we started coming up with solutions, we wanted to talk to Gary to really figure out, what are the users' needs. And so the 5 takeaways that we have from the discussion was 1, he wanted us to decrease the motion that was necessary in order to get the hook open and closed. 2, decrease the discomfort that they felt in the harness. 3, keep it lightweight, keep it durable, and then lastly, keep the mechanism of feedback that you get from a more mechanical design. And the most important technical constraint that we had is that the mechanism needed to be able to pull 2 to 4 pounds of force with 2 inches of excursion. So we then started to look at, what they already have out on the market. The limitations that we found with Myoelectric were that it's a slow reaction, which we kind of saw in Gary's talk. Minimal to no haptic feedback, which you find with a lot of the more electrical prosthetic devices. It's expensive. Myoelectric sensors tend to react to microwaves in the surrounding area, and then also the motor itself makes noise. For the standard harness, it takes force to operate, and for some people that's very difficult. It's an obvious motion, so like we talked about the biscapular motion that I'll demonstrate later. And the harness can become uncomfortable here under the area, and it's not very cosmetic. So after that, we tried to look at some solutions that people have had to those problems. Myoelectric for the haptic feedback, putting sensors on the hand and the fingers of the device and registering that sensation in the prosthetic. Using cheaper materials, encasing the motor so that the sound doesn't get out, and also encasing the sensors themselves for the electromagnetic waves to affect it. And for the standard harness, using different motions to actuate the device. So whether that's like a shoulder extension, elbow extension, and also like chest expansion. And then using a more robust harness, which you can see here, that has more padding. And so what we really wanted to do was take some of these solutions, but also optimize on them so we get less motion, and it is more comfortable for the user.
So during our brainstorm, we were able to categorize our ideas into 3 main groups. We have those that are purely mechanical, those that are purely electric, and those that are hybrid systems. So they couple some sort of mechanical component as well as an electrical component. So here are our ideas. We've got a myoelectric sensor, which Bryce and Eric already talked about, but in this little clip, you can see that the feedback isn't great, so the functionality isn't the best. We've got a mechanical gear idea, a system that employs an electric hook, and finally our hybrid mechanical linear actuator. So I'll just go through the Pew chart that we made, and first I just wanted to touch on the metrics we used to design it. So we put functionality, we weighted functionality and comfort as the top, because those were the aspects that Gary said were most important in our design. And then that's followed by cosmesis, cost, and like the coolness factor. So first, looking at our traditional body harness, it has great functionality. It works very well, so that's the top rated. However, its comfort is lower because of the aspects that Bryce mentioned earlier. Now, looking at our myoelectric sensor, it's kind of the complement to that. It's great on comfort because it doesn't require the body harness. However, it has poor functionality, and also it's the most expensive. It ranges about $30,000, whereas a traditional body harness would be about $10,000. Next, we had a mechanical gear system, which essentially employs 2 gears configured in such a way that you could either decrease the force that you needed to exert by increasing your excursion, or conversely, decrease the excursion you needed by increasing the force that you exerted. So that had great functionality because it provided that haptic feedback. However, it was low on comfort because you're balancing between your force and your excursion. We have an electric hook method, which uses a linear actuator as a motor to initiate the opening and closing of the terminal device. So that has great function because you're amplifying your signal, so you don't require as much force that you exert. However, it has low functionality because it doesn't provide any sort of feedback. So finally, we came with our decided with a hybrid mechanical linear actuator system. So this couples a pressure sensor with the linear actuator. So the pressure sensor provides the feedback system, which increases your functionality, and the linear actuator, the motor, provides the amplification of your signal, so you don't have to exert as much force.
So looking at that one that she just talked about, you see that the cable still is connected in the same way to the terminal device, but then it comes around here to the triceps pad, where it's going to be actuated by the linear actuator. And then this remains in line to the back of the harness through a pressure sensor so that you still get the same feedback that you were getting before, but you don't have to be applying the entirety of the force, and that can be altered different ways for different people with different capabilities. So what is our current progress? We've looked at this. We developed a testing fixture for testing our new system. It's a stable fixture on Duron, looking at size and placement, because maybe it's too big on the tricep pad, and power versus speed from the linear actuator. And then first the test fixture, and then hooking it onto the actual prosthetic arm to see how it translates into a more realistic system. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Number 4 is the Team LL Bean LLC. A lot of L's in there. There you go.
We took a few L's. Thanks. All right. I'm going to be telling you. We're not that email. I think we're the one that says ENGR 110. It's the fourth from the right. Nope.
Nope.
Okay.
We are none of these. Number 4.
Oh, right.
That's refreshing. Yeah.
That's right here, the dollar.
So we are.
Go.
All right, great. Hey everyone, I'm Evan. This is Oscar. That's Ben. For reasons we can go into later, we are Team LL Bean LLC, and we are working on a lighter leg brace for our user. His name is Dr. Peter Stansky. He's a professor here at Stanford. Teaches history. That's him, looking very pedagogical. So Dr. Stansky's had a knee replacement, and he's missing a couple of tendons in his quadriceps, which obligates him to wear a leg brace. Pretty much this brace, as our brace model over there is demonstrating, it can come down and lock the leg such that it cannot bend. When one lacks the quadriceps, it's hard to straighten back out, and so the leg brace keeps it locked so that he can walk reasonably well. Now, despite this, he's had a couple of major falls, so the system clearly still needs some improvement. His needs, as we learned through interviewing him, are twofold. First, to decrease the weight of the brace. The actual brace weighs about 3.6 pounds, although according to one of the orthotists, it's psychologically 20 pounds, more importantly. The other is that the locking mechanism could also use some improvement. As for the lighter leg brace task, so Dr. Stansky has had another brace before. There's a trade-off here with the leg brace between weight and stability. You can imagine that the more structure you build into a brace, the better it stays on the leg, the easier it is to support, but the more material you'll have doing that, then obviously the more it weighs. His first brace leaned toward the weight side. His second brace, the one that we've modeled, the one that we'll show you pictures of now, leans towards the slippage side. So here's some pictures of Dr. Stansky's CAFO, which is an acronym I'll explain in a second. So Ben, you can show how that goes on the leg. Matt? Great. So as these pictures go, this is basically the back, and the leg points forward that way. And from what you can see, and you can come check this out later, there's these locks, so this can freely bend at the moment when it's not coming apart in my hands, for which I blame myself. So it can freely bend, but then there are locks on the sides that when you bring them down while not also holding a laser pointer, they lock the brace in place so that it can no longer bend. And that doesn't happen with the real one. As for our products, we're also working with Gary and Ashley as assistant.
The KFO stands for knee, ankle, foot orthosis. And it has 4 primary functions: support the muscles, immobilize the joints, correct the leg positioning, and finally, the critical function is this locking mechanism, which drops in place, as you can come see here later.
So initially we were operating under this initial goal to reduce the weight. So we went ahead and brainstormed some ideas. The first one was to remove the distal upright from one of the sides, because given that anything that's weighted distally has a larger moment, so that's where the most effect of the weight is felt. However, we soon realized in removing that amount of material that the leg brace wouldn't support the load in torsion. Again, trying to get rid of material, we thought, hey, let's just get rid of both uprights and introduce a sort of belt mechanism where it would be supported at the hip, sort of like a suspender. However, we soon realized that this would require a lot of additional adjustments within Dr. Stansky's clothing, and it would just be quite uncomfortable just having that extra amount of material under his clothing. And then finally, we considered removing both of these back upper thigh supports and combining them down into one, and hopefully having less material on that section. However, the problem there was that that would probably increase discomfort, because the more surface area you have in one of those single supports, you just have increased kind of sweating and irritation that comes with the skin. And so that brought us to revising our goal and figuring out what would be the next thing we could possibly work on. Granted that for decades the CAFO has been optimized for weight. And so we eventually came to create our new goal, which is to improve the safety, ease of use, and reliability of the joint locking mechanism. Ben will take it away.
So as we interviewed Dr. Stansky, he mentioned that the locking mechanism isn't perfect. At times it has become unlocked when he thought it was locked, which can result in some stumbling. So we want to produce a mechanism that provides reliable knee locking. So we looked at existing CAFOs that have some automatic knee locking systems. There's a spring lock and a cam lock, both of which drop a small metal piece into the joint to prevent it from buckling once the knee is in full extension. However, this would require significant modification to the brace that we can't do. So we want instead to modify his existing brace to add this sort of auto lock feature. So we want to create a spring-loaded lock that auto engages when the knee is in extension, and we want to add a cable release so he doesn't have to reach all the way down his knee, but can instead pull on something closer to his hip to release that, that lock, with the idea that eventually it'll improve reliability and the ease of use. So starting with this existing device, it has this drop lock, and we want to add some springs and a cable to do it. So the extension springs, when the brace is fully extended, will pull that drop lock down over the joint to prevent bending. But that cable system is similar to the brake cable on your bike, so he can easily pull a little handle up by his hip, and it'll pull the lock up so he can flex it to sit down. Our next steps, we're going to prototype this joint and locking mechanism out of Duron and then start fabricating components. We need to consider which springs we're using, how much force they're providing, how we're going to mount the spring and the cable on so it's not interfering with this clothing or the rest of the device. And also, as always, we need to make it as cool as possible. Only he's really seeing it because it's underneath his pants, but he sees it, so we can make it cool. That is.
Thank you. Next up is the trolls.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so hi everyone. We're the second Magical Bears Playground group, and so our team is me, Chloe, Nini, and Amanda. So first we want to get to know the Magical Bridge Playground a little bit. We all visited on Tuesday, but we want to walk through it a little bit more again. So the problem is that playgrounds are not designed to be accessible for everyone. In general, they're focused towards children, but Magical Bridge Playground tries to create a space where everyone can come and play, and that everyone can participate in every element of the playground. And part of the scope of this project is that sensory stimulation from play, especially interactive play with others, is really important for cognitive development of children. So this is a very important issue, and lots of playgrounds around the country don't allow all children to play. So that's why Magical Bridge is tackling this problem. So we met with Alinka and Jay, which you guys have also met, and they took us around the playground. We visited a few times, and a big component to our need finding was watching children interact with the playground, especially with Alinka and Jay, sort of watching example situations in which a disabled child would interact with a different feature, and then also exploring with them features that they wanted to see implemented and problems that they saw current day with the playground as it is. So thinking about the way the playground is today and their current solutions, they focus a lot on transfer height accessible features. So creating things that if you're in a wheelchair or have a different accessible device, you're able to be sort of moved from your device into the feature, experience it, and then brought back. And so although that is a great existing solution, we were really excited to explore a feature or experience that will allow everyone to come and experience it as they are, and will kind of eliminate this need for transfer to experience most of the playground. So we also wanted to focus on this idea of sensory stimulation, which right now the playground does an awesome job of bringing in different senses and having lots of things to see and touch and hear. And we'll also obviously focus on inclusivity. So the need that we identified, we set ourselves a few specific goals. One, creating a feature that did not require any transfer, so a wheelchair can wheel right up to it and experience it all fully. Second, we wanted to involve the sensory stimulation, and we also wanted to make use of underutilized space and navigation patterns. One of the problems we noticed with the playground right now is that it's so busy and popular that it can get kind of chaotic when so many children are using it. And we actually spoke with Alinka and Jay, and one thing that they had heard from feedback from parents is that parents of disabled children are sometimes afraid to bring their children to the playground because it's so popular, because they're afraid of implied danger of so many kids running around. So finally, we also wanted to encourage creativity. So one of the things we loved about playgrounds when we were little were not just necessarily the physical features that you could interact with, but also those that inspire imagination and being whimsical.
Okay, so when we were exploring solutions, we decided to break the problem down into two main areas. The first would be providing new experiences for people with low or limited mobility. We saw that existing solutions, like she was saying, are like transfer platforms or dignity exits from the attractions, but we wanted to actually use the wheelchair to have fun in the park or in the ride we designed. For this, we took inspiration from an attraction in a playground right outside Magical Bridge, where you would get on an angled platform and it would spin you around without using a lot of force. But it would be really hard to wheel a wheelchair user into a platform safely and then have to log them down. So we discarded this idea. Next, I can describe it. We're thinking, Alinka actually wanted a water feature in the park. This is the one that Wheel 41 doesn't have one. But then there are a lot of safety concerns. If you have open water, there are kids running around, and they can just get dirty, which the parents don't always want. So we decided to enclose a magical lily pad pond where kids could jump from lily pad to lily pad, but the actual surface would be covered by a really strong plastic or acrylic. So they would get the experience of jumping on the water or even wheeling over the lily pads, and they would either produce sound or produce light. So you have different sensory experiences. Our next idea was to have a magical control panel, which would actually help the kids who are visually impaired too, because they would control a lot of levers, or they could control a rocket ship or an airplane, and this would play more with like tickling a kid's imagination instead of just making them get on a ride. The next area we wanted to focus on would be to optimize the underutilized areas of the park. Alinka actually told us that the fencing around all the parks is really expensive and kids actually don't use it. So for this, we're thinking of having a xylophone type instrument where you can use the geometry of the bars to take a stick and either like play a song or like play with other kids. Now the problem with that is if you have something that's attachable in a park that have a lot of kids running around, they could either hit each other with it or it could just disappear. And then because this is also like a park, it's at the fence, it's at the edge of the park, kids could have a quiet space if they need a long time or if they need to like rest from just the chaos of the park.
Cool. And the last idea we were thinking about was actually building a magical bridge. So you may have noticed there were a lot of bridges coming into the park, but they weren't very interactive. So this kind of combines similar technology to the lily pad pond with the idea of making use of underutilized areas of the park. The way this would work is you roller step over it and you activate something else. Maybe a fountain turns on or a little windmill spins or something like that. So we brought our top 3 ideas to Alenka. We chose the lily pad pond, the control panel, and the bridge as our top 3. These were the most exciting to us, the most cool and unique. After talking with her for a while, she decided that she liked the magical bridge best. She'd been thinking of working on a redesign for the bridge, and she was just really excited by the possibilities there. There's a cool animation to this that we really did. Cool. So, moving forward, we designed a quick prototype. So this kind of physically shows what we want to do. This uses the color scheme of the Magical Bridge Playground. You can see the side railings. Olenka pointed out something important to us, which is that people need to be able to hold onto the side railings to move. So you can't build anything on top, but we can build things that are interactive along that kind of string on the bottom. She also pointed out that when we visited the park on Tuesday, some users who are visually impaired and using canes have difficulty on bridges with slats in them. So this bridge kind of eliminates the need to do that by using a flat surface. Our next steps, we have a little background in electronics. So we're going to work on implementing those electronics using force-sensitive resistors perhaps to activate an outcome and deciding exactly what that outcome should be for the maximum fun. Thanks, Ed.
I just want to encourage everybody to fill out these evaluations because I know if you're in a team, you really appreciate feedback. If you don't give feedback, then it's not helpful. So next team is a wheelchair camper team.
All right, good to go? Hi everyone, I'm Jake. It's Rachel, Roger, and Tenzin. We are the wheelchair camber project, but we still have no names, so we're the fifth team with no name as of right now. There are 2.2 approximately million Americans that use wheelchairs today, and there's a bunch of different designs for the wheelchair, surprisingly, and the camber deals with the angle of the wheel. So our question is, what is the difference in a vertical camber or a tilted one? And both have their pros and both have their cons. Rachel's here is more of a vertical one, whereas Tony's up here is who we are working with is more of a slanted camber. And Rachel, if you want to outline, we interviewed Tony and he gave us some of the pros and cons of either.
Yeah, so to develop our design criteria, we interviewed Tony and we also conducted some research into existing solutions. And based on our interviews with Tony, we came up with the following needs statement. A way to change the camber of Tony's rear wheelchair wheels that maximizes wheeling stability and efficiency while minimizing chair width so it can pass through tight spaces. And that's the trade-off. The trade-off is between stability and efficiency, which you get through increasing the camber, and the ability to go through tight spaces, which you get through minimizing. So based on our interviews and research, we identified 3 key design priorities. So the first one is that the solution must be compatible with Tony's existing wheelchair. And that's important because Tony's wheelchair is no longer on the market. And the way his rear wheel axle is set up is quite different to typical customized wheelchairs on the market today. Specifically, it doesn't have a single continuous axle. Instead, camber is provided through brackets, which you'll hear about shortly. And for wheelchairs currently on the market, camber is typically provided through axle inserts that screw in to that single rear wheel axle. And they typically enable camber to be varied between 0 and 18 degrees. The challenge though is that to change the camber, you have to get out of the wheelchair, remove the wheels and unscrew. So the second design criteria was that a solution should allow the camber to be changed from 1 to 6 degrees. So this is important. Between 1 to 6 degrees, so Tony's not so interested in 6 to 18 degrees. And that the change may be continuous or incremental. And the third design criteria, which is perhaps the most important one, is that Tony needs to be able to change the camber without assistance, without using tools, and whilst remaining in his wheelchair. And that criteria is critical because Tony is independent, he lives a super busy life, and he needs to be able to change the camber every time he goes for a walk, essentially.
So the design needs ultimately were that it needs to be lightweight, as Tony's wheelchair is fairly light and we don't want to make it any heavier than it is. We cannot deface the wheelchair, it shouldn't have any extra things into the original frame, and cannot increase the chair's original width, as getting through doors was already a problem with a cambered wheelchair, and we don't want to make that an issue when it's at 0 degrees. So the existing solutions are, such as this one, this is actually, I think, through Quickie GPV, which is the brand wheelchair that Tony uses. They released a mounting system that allows you to tilt the wheels, but the issue is it requires the user to get out of the wheelchair, not something everyone can actually do. And so we have two designs. The right one we quickly trashed because essentially you need a pivot point at the top and you have a bar that would push the bottom of the bracket out to tilt it, but this would require you could not do this while seated because it'd be underneath the wheelchair and it would require a motor if that was the case. The design on the left is what we ultimately went with. There would be a handle on the top along with the current horizontal bracket and the vertical bracket, and by pulling up or down on the vertical bracket, you can change the angle of the horizontal one, thus changing the tilt of the wheelchair.
After all the brainstorming and research and talking with Tony, what you see here is the design that we thought was the best. So basically we have two brackets, so a horizontal bracket and a vertical bracket. For our prototype we used pink foam, and then we also used a Crayola marker to kind of represent a mechanical fastener. So we kind of just wanted to model like the pin and slot connection here. So here we have the side view. You can see that the vertical bracket here, it slides up and down. So basically, Tony, he can pull up or down on the handle that will be attached to the vertical bracket, and then he can adjust between 0 and 6 degrees. So we thought this design was the best because it was simple. It's the most convenient for Tony because all he has to do is pull on the handle, and it meets all of our design and functional requirements. So for the rest of the quarter, we're planning on prototyping more with the handle. Hopefully by next week, have that done, and then use the last 2 weeks to create our functional prototype. We're planning on using aluminum because it's easy to machine, it's relatively low cost, and the TAs in the bureau can help us with the other issues. Thank you.
Say thank you.
Thank you.
Next is wheelchair workers.
Good evening.
Okay, go.
Good evening. We're the wheelchair workers. My name is Erica Rivera. I'm a sophomore studying mechanical engineering, Annie and Maddie are both seniors studying symbolic systems. And so our project, what we decided to do was work with Abby in personalizing her wheelchair. And when we met with Abby, several things that we learned about her was that she's an older adult, she lives alone, she has a service dog named Nathan, and she has mobility challenges, and she uses a wheelchair and has difficulty with navigation.
Cool. So we're going to be working on 2 different problems to address with Abby's wheelchair. And the first one has to do with personalizing her wheelchair. So whereas one's choice of clothing, accessories, and shoes can be made on a daily basis, wheelchair users have to wear their wheelchairs every day and for every occasion. And so many of these wheelchair users would prefer the opportunity to personalize their wheelchairs or switch it up based on what type of activity they're doing. And this includes Abby. So Abby would really like to extend her personal sense of style to her wheelchair, and so through our project, we're going to try to build a couple of different designs that would add significant character to her wheelchair. So when we met with Abby, we learned that she is very active. She participates in a lot of organizations. She does a lot of different types of activities. She loves art. She used to be an art teacher. And she doesn't want any accessories that would like get in the way of, you know, the general functioning of her wheelchair. And so we're hoping to be able to build something that would allow her to better express herself for all the various ways that she can kind of be in the world.
So when doing our research, one existing solution that we found in the market was a company called Imagination Sparks Innovation. What they do is basically personalize the wheelchair. However, a limitation that we found was that it was mostly catering to children and not older folks. And something that Abby mentioned when we met with her was that she feels uncomfortable because when people look at her, she says they look at the wheelchair and they don't look at her. And so we wanted to do something that would basically help her express herself.
Cool, and then I'm just going to talk for a second about kind of our process and finding some potential solutions to work on from here. So we started with brainstorming a lot of different things, everything from kind of personalized armrests to capes and umbrellas or bandana for Nathan, her service dog. And after talking to Abby some, we narrowed these down to 3 possible options. The first is basically creating decorative like covers for the wheelchair that are in the shape of the wheelchair and incorporate some of Abby's art. So it would be in this shape with kind of a plastic covered clip-on. And Abby really liked this idea because it would get to incorporate her art, and we might be able to kind of interchange the art that is used. Given each day, she could kind of interchange a different piece of art. Here are some examples of her art again. The second solution we came up with was putting kind of decorative covers on the armrest for Abby. She really liked this idea because of the aspect of comfort it might provide. And then finally, creating kind of interchangeable, like if we created 25 more disposable or like less high-tech paper covers for Abby's wheelchair that she could interchange and develop herself based on occasion. One limitation here was that these might not be as durable as the hard plastic cover.
Cool, so that's the personalization project, and now we're moving on to the second thing we're going to work on, which is on enhanced visibility. So this is kind of a twofold problem. The first part being that when wheelchair users are in the dark, they have trouble seeing their path ahead, and the second part of the problem is other people have trouble seeing them. And so basically with our project, we are hoping to address both parts of these problems by attaching lights to Abby's wheelchair, which will allow her to have an illuminated path, and also, like, in doing so, other people will be able to see her because there are lights. And when we talked with Abby and learned a little bit more about what she does, we learned that she likes to walk Nathan in the morning and at night, and she does a lot of activities at night, which require her to sometimes park far away, and so she ends up maneuvering a lot in the darkness, and so adding lights and maybe like reflective material to make herself visible and allow her to see better is like a really crucial part of our project.
And when, again, doing our research, we look into the market. There's a company, First Century Scientific Inc., and basically what they do was implement a light under the seat of the wheelchair. However, one of the limitations that we found was like when the user's sitting down on the chair, on the seat, their legs may cover the light, which we thought might cause like a dysfunction.
And again, I'm going to talk a little bit about our process in finding a solution here. So again, we had lots of ideas from attaching lights to the wheelchair, to Nathan, to glow-in-the-dark bandanas for Nathan, and attaching lights to Abby's knees or feet. And after talking to Abby some about this, the main things that she cared about were that the light was strong enough, and also that it wasn't susceptible to being kind of banged off, since the wheelchair does hit things sometimes. So basically what we decided to do is find kind of like an industry-made light and find a good place. We're thinking kind of the undersides of Abby's armrest to attach that light so that it can have enough span. So basically our next step are to research kind of strong enough lights, and also play around with different places to put it on the wheelchair by using something simple like a flashlight for where that might go, and also figure out a good way to attach that to the wheelchair.
Cool. And in the future, we're gonna work on further prototyping and figuring out what type of art we want to select from Abby, and also researching existing solutions for the light problem. Thank you so much.
Next is Team Empower.
Okay, so we're going to present to you guys our door monitoring system solution for Empower U. My name is Nathan Petrie.
I'm Michael Segbe.
Jason Hogan.
So a little background about the company. The company Empower U was started by Laura McIntosh to try to give high-risk medical patients a reliable in-home monitoring system to detect sort of medical emergencies that might occur using modern sensors. So the way this Empower U system works is that sensors are put around a person's home, they collect information about that individual, and then they relay that information to the Empower U home system. Now this home system, or this Empower U overarching system, uses a machine learning algorithm to sort of learn about that individual's day-to-day activities, their habits, their sleeping patterns, and then it compiles that into a database about that person. So an example would be motion sensors put around the house would communicate to the system and help it learn about an individual's sleeping habits. It would be able to learn about when they fall asleep, how long, and when they would wake up. Now, once it compiles this database of an individual's sort of habits and normal rituals, it then can sort of search for anomalies during a regular day. It could search for potential medical emergencies. For example, if the system knows that an individual wakes up at 7 a.m. every day, but then one day after 7 a.m. for 4 hours, there's no motions detected in the house, it would send out an alert and contact a family member or a medical professional. So here's an example of a floor plan of the house with the Empower U system implemented. We have motion sensors in the bedroom, the kitchen, the hallway that detect activity in the house and make sure someone's moving around, that they're okay. And we have watt meters connected to the major appliances, like the TV and the stove. This relays information about appliance use. If the person's motionless in bed watching TV, the system knows the TV's on, and it knows that they're okay, even though there's no motion detected. We also have a door sensor on the door that knows when the door's opened or closed. So the major problem that Empower U faces is with the door sensor. Current on-market sensors, door sensors, have no way of determining if someone is walking into a home or leaving a home. This could cause false alerts or misalerts. If the system thinks someone is in the home and they're actually not, then this would be a false alert. If the system thinks someone is away from home and they're in the home, then the system isn't monitoring the person anymore. If they have an emergency, it has no way of contacting So Laura has asked us to try to come up with a solution to communicate to the system whether someone is walking into the house or exiting the house. And in the next slides, we'll present sort of the product specifications as well as our potential solution.
Okay, so I'll talk quickly through the product specifications. From our conversation with Laura, she listed out specific user and technical requirements that our solution must take into consideration. So for our user requirements, our users want to maintain their independence. Autonomy is something that is extremely important to them. No cameras can be used in our solution. Our users don't want to feel as if they're being watched the entire time. Our solution can't use any wearable devices. Wearable devices are subject to the user wearing them every single day, which if anybody ever uses a Fitbit, I know I have one, it's in my cupboard right now. And lastly, sensors must be hidden from plain view. Again, the idea that our users don't want to feel like they're being watched. For the technical requirements, our solution has to be able to determine if the user enters and exits the house. For our solution to be compatible with the EmpowerU network, it must be battery powered and use the Z-Wave signal protocol. And then lastly, our solution can't use any screws for installation, and this is going back to the idea that our sensors should be basically hidden from plain view. So a couple of existing solutions that we asked Laura, as well as we researched into door sensors that EmpowerU uses. As we said earlier, we can't tell if the user is entering or exiting. Cameras we can't use because the user does not want to be watched. Motion sensors on the back and fronts of the door could have been thought about, but Laura told us that these sensors are too dependent on house layout, and our solution needs to be applicable to any sort of home. And lastly, hinge sensors that can detect when the door is open and closed don't work because they're extremely hard to install. So we first started our brainstorm with places that we could put a sensor on the door. As you can tell, there's a lot of places on a door that you could put a sensor onto. And then we thought about the different things on the door that the sensor could sense: motion, heat, sound, and pressure, to name a few things. And so we came up with a list of ideas here, from an auditory sensor that could tell the difference if a door opens and closes, to heat sensor on the handles. And Chase will explain the solution that we thought was the best.
So the main problem here was that the door sensors can't tell direction. So in essence, we need a system of two-step authentication to determine whether a user is entering or exiting the home. And the way we thought to do that was incorporating a pressure mat onto the bottom of someone's already existing doormat, either inside the house or outside the house. And these two use cases will help explain the solution. In the first use case, in the user exiting the home, if the pressure mat was on the doormat inside the house, the user would first step on the pressure mat, then open the door, step off the pressure mat, then close the door, and then exiting the house would further be confirmed by no other activity detected, such as by the watt meters on the appliances or the motion sensors, for the next 5 minutes. In the next case, where the user enters the home, the user would first open the door, and then step on the pressure mat, close the door, and then step off the pressure mat, and then activity would then be detected in the house by motion sensors or sensors on the appliances. So for our initial prototype, we took the door sensor that Laura had already given us, that's already used in the EmpowerU system, and we set up an idealized pressure mat that matches the size of kind of standard doormat sold in the US, which is about 18 by 30 inches. And the idea for our pressure mat is to take pressure sensors and put them on the bottom of people's existing doormats, so we don't have to change the layout of their house or feel like our solution is encroaching on theirs. And we found that we ran an experiment and that people stepped on the pressure mat often enough to verify our initial prototype. So as far as next steps, we want to take this to a hardware solution. So building a prototype and installing it in our dorm, running an experiment. And then other problems to tackle are poor signal transmission that could be due to a metal door or other materials, as well as trying to find a low-cost solution for our pressure mat.
Thank you.
Last but
Hi everyone. We are working on creative expression for Danny. A little bit about who we are. I'm Tristan.
I'm Israel. I'm Don Mark.
And together we're Danny's Dudes. That's because our user is Danny, who you've probably seen here in the classroom with his brother Stan. He is a consultant for Liftware, so we've also seen him in the video, which is a device that helps you keep your kitchenware level. He has cortical vision impairment and cerebral palsy, so he has trouble both with his motion and his vision. And his goal is to be able to express himself independently. So he loves to paint, and he's also expressed interest in doing other types of art projects, such as making beaded jewelry. So we interviewed him while he was painting a couple different times, and we asked him about his painting troubles and observed some troubles that we saw, and then also talked to him about some other things. So some of his problems that he faced was that he couldn't tell which paint was which. He had trouble opening the paint tubes just because of his dexterity issues, or cleaning off the brushes in between, changing colors and other finer tasks like that. We also did a little test where we had little pieces of wood or coins for him to pick up to see, what his dexterity was with bead-sized objects. And he also can't tell where the white space on the canvas is, and his goal in painting is often just to fill up the entire canvas with paint. So you can see here in the picture that little blue post-it note. We were testing on the fly to see whether that would be sort of like a good indicator to feel where the edge of the canvas is. And we were also interested what sort of audio technologies he uses or speech control technologies he uses to test whether we could use that in our solution, as you'll see in a minute. And he actually does have an Amazon Echo at home that he uses a lot, as well as using Siri. So now to the define step.
Cool. So from the synthesis from the information that we synthesized during our interview, we were able to define our problem statement. Our problem statement is as follows: to improve the independence and the quality of life for Danny as it relates to creative expression. So now that we've gone over our problem statement, we'll go over our ideation phase with John Mark.
So looking at current products that are in the market for people with disabilities similar to Danny's, we found that there are a lot of limitations due to the fact that Danny has a combination of both the visual impairment and the dexterity issues. For example, there are palettes made for people who are blind, but due to Danny's dexterity, he can't pinpoint the specific parts of the canvas, the palette that he needs to put his paintbrush in, so he normally just swipes. The Liftware that he uses doesn't quite work when the canvas is on the table, which works better for him when he paints usually. And jewelry making kits are made for people with higher dexterity who are able to actually string the beads themselves, which he's not able to do. So when we brainstormed, we decided to try to find ways to either improve on existing technology or come up with new methods for him to express himself on his own. We decided to focus on 3 and brought those to Danny and Stanford, and they liked all of them, so we prototyped all of them. One of them was a rotating canvas that Danny would be able to either push or be on a timer so you could reach all the parts of the canvas once he's filled up one area. Another one was a sort of funnel system to a string that he could put beads into so that he could string the beads himself, and the only help he would need is actually to take the finished product off and tie it off. And then the third idea was to have a palette that gives audio feedback so he knows which color he was using at a certain time.
So now onto our prototypes. The first one, as we mentioned, he uses voice-controlled things like Siri. So during our meeting, I kind of drew this interaction out and was thinking we could use the little devices called tiles that you typically put in your wallet or in a keychain or something like that. And he could tell Siri, please find my red paint or blue paint or whatever it is. And even though he can't see them, he's really good at pinpointing specific sounds. He's very precise with picking out sounds, and so he could feel for it based on where the thing is beeping. And in this video, you can kind of see that interaction. Alexa, please find the red paint. And so it would automatically activate the tracker and find that by making a beep. And then right now, that interaction is already possible with Alexa, but we would just be making a more lightweight solution. So whereas a tile can find geo-tracking in far distances, this would only need to be nearby objects, so it would just be a very simple Bluetooth functionality, and it could be much cheaper. In that case, you could get several different tiles on all different objects, and maybe not even just for painting, but for several objects around the house, and just making him more independent in several ways. Do you want to just...
Sure. So I'll move on. Danny has also expressed interest in making his own jewelry, but right now he can't do it on his own. So we thought of an idea where we'd have sort of a funnel system that goes towards a rod with a string attached, where he'd just be able to drop a bead in. It would fall onto the rod and around the string, and at the end you could lift off the funnel, take the string off, and you'd have a finished product. After talking to Sanford, so it was a great idea. He also thought of later on, for future iterations, putting the bowl of beads underneath, so that if Danny picks up a bead and drops it on the way to the funnel, it would just fall right back into the rest of the beads. And then creating a sort of guard, you can see it in the sketch on the last slide. Creating a sort of guard here to make sure that the bead actually falls onto the rod in the right orientation, rather than getting stuck in the mouth of the funnel there.
Our final idea and prototype was a design that, as you can see on this image here, it would be something where an easel to hold a canvas. You'd imagine, Danny usually paints on a much larger canvas, maybe 3 or 4 times this size, but just for the prototype I used something that I had laying around. But the idea of the prototype is that the canvas would be able to move left, right, up, down, and it would also be able to swivel along the z-axis, so that Danny can easily and accessibly reach all of the corners of the canvas and be able to fill in all the white space without too much additional help from his brother or anyone else, really. And finally, our next steps and our testing is that we want to meet with Danny as soon as possible to get his feedback on all of our prototypes, get his opinions on what he thinks are the most useful features or which prototype is his favorite, and then be able to move on with the fabrication phase. Thank you all for listening to our presentation.
Well, I want to thank everybody for their excellent presentations. You can see they did a very good job, and we are almost on time. This is like the closest we've been to making it within the class time. So thank you very much. Leave your evaluations on the desk. If you haven't signed in, please do that. And have a great